Earlier this year, I turned 30, which realistically isn't a big deal. But it's one of those landmark ages where it feels like you're supposed to have certain things figured out. Maybe a general idea of where you're going in life. It was definitely an introspective milestone, at least for me. And right around that same time, I was presented with a bit of an ultimatum. Did I want to continue trying to make it as a content creator, scraping by on minimum wage barista work, hoping something of mine would blow up? Or did I take an out of my league full-time position that would leave me next to no time for anything else? Creative freedom or adult responsibility? Honestly, the choice was kind of terrifying, and my anxiety paralyzed me. So, to soothe my mind and just kind of disconnect, I picked up a game I had previously been kind of underwhelmed by. So this is how Sable helped me embrace change. Or how I stopped worrying and learned to love sand. Before I get into the video essay, just wanted to jump in here and remind you to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more video essays like this one. And if you'd like to financially support me in producing more of this content in the future, since it's really not cheap, I have a Ko-fi page linked in my description as well as the pinned comment, but more about that at the end of the video. Oh, and remember, Lovecraft was racist. Prior to its release, the trailer for Sable electrified me. It was like nothing I had ever seen before. I was hooked immediately, ready to hop on a hover bike and set out into the Mobius-inspired desert. This was everything I wanted in a game. It looked incredible, the colors, the Japanese breakfast soundtrack, the apocalyptic sandpunk stylings. My imagination was running wild. So I put it at number 1 on my Steam wishlist. Anytime there was an update about the game, I felt a resurgence of anticipation. I don't let myself get on board too many gaming hype trains anymore, but for Sable, my hype was chugging on full steam ahead. And then, in late 2021, when the game came out, I downloaded it, booted it up, played about an hour of it, and I was bored. I put it down pretty deflated. It felt like just another open world checklist-a-thon. But I think a game like Sable very much operates under the principle of you get out what you put in. And at the time, I didn't really try to appreciate what Shedworks were presenting me with. Sable's journey of self-discovery just wasn't what I needed at the time. So I parked my hover bike and moved on to other journeys. I guess I was just looking for something different from my gaming experience at the time. Something a little more... But something earlier this year beckoned. I heard the distant call, a whirring hum luring me back to the deserts of Midden. For whatever reason, I picked up Sable again, wanting to give it another shot. And this time, it really hit. We play as the titular Sable, a young woman of the Ibexii tribe, a nomadic people in a world whose adolescents go through a rite of passage known as the gliding, during which they explore professions and callings that they might want to commit themselves to. It's a time of self-discovery where one's whole life stands before them. A short-lived freedom to do whatever. Plus, you get to float around in a fancy sci-fi bubble, so that's pretty cool. But it seems like Sable's ambitions shift like the sands of the deserts around her. So it's our job as the player, through exploration and introspection, to guide her to a decision. And crucially, there's no wrong decision here. It's part of what makes the game so rewarding and unique. Now, if you've never played Sable for yourself and you're seeing this footage and thinking, this looks like Breath of the Wild, you're right. It does, doesn't it? At least at a glance. Because Sable is no Link. She may be the main character, but not necessarily the world's protagonist. She's not a hero. She's only remarkable in her unremarkableness. While the gliding journey she's on is fairly alien from our perspective, in the world of Midden, she's just another young adult on a gap year of sorts. There is no combat in the wadis and feldspars of these deserts. The conflict isn't with hordes of bokoblins, but it's internal. Sable isn't on this journey to save anyone, really. Except maybe this guy at the bottom of a well? She's not doing extraordinary things, she's just finding her place in this world. It's at once comforting and also paralyzing. There is no main quest. The journey itself is your main goal. To explore and learn and just become a part of the tapestry of Midden's culture. Shedworks refer to this story structure as a lemon, which, I mean, it makes more sense when you actually look at a lemon, I guess. We spare no expense here, folks. A narrow beginning and end, but in the middle, the meat of the journey is wide and full of freedom. You can spend as much or as little time as you want here, making your inevitable decision for which of the game's 14 masks you'd like to commit yourself to. Sable's dilemma hits painfully and sincerely close to home, making the choice that much more daunting. It's at once simple and so complex. And this is where Sable shines, in its writing and in its quieter soundscapes. Meeting these characters, listening to their stories, and getting drawn into this vibrant waste. It's a contemplation, especially while navigating a Baksamoon, your hover bike named after the hottest and driest North African desert wind. But nothing about Sable feels sweltering or uncomfortable. Seductive color schemes and anonymous chirps ask you to stay a while. To sit and drink it all in. And I did. Because of its ever-soothing atmosphere, even when in the recesses of the digestive tract of an ancient worm, I kept playing and exploring. That's the magic of Sable. I've heard a lot of criticism about this game in forum threads and comment sections, deriding this game for being a prime example of style over substance gaming. But I would honestly argue that the style here is the substance. The visual presentation is part of what makes Sable's journey so meditative and evocative. If it were rendered any more realistically, like the video gamey deserts before it, the landscape would feel desolate, lonely, decaying, harsh, an inhospitable climate to be survived or overcome. The sands of Midden are unlike any other video game desert. Most of the time, virtual seas of silica are bound to a pretty muted range of hues. You'll get beige, browns, and yellows if you're lucky. But not here. It's a kaleidoscope of sand and color. The desert is ideal, an emotional representation of landscape, not gritty or realistic. It's flat, yet brimming with life. Among the arenaphilic flora, it feels like this world is flourishing. Dunes sway in distant Fata Morganas, graded sandstone a rainbow of vibrant oranges, and slumbering skeletons of an age long past. It never feels scorching. It never feels rough or coarse. Because of its art style, Midden texturally feels smooth and inviting, almost cool and breezy. subdued environments, and minimal details. Although living in a desert like the one Sable was born into would be uncomfortably hot, the stylistic choices convey tranquility rather than fiery tongues of the sand around her. Even its darkest caverns and loneliest dunes never feel liminal or hostile. It's inviting and comforting, making you revel in its quietness, when other games may use these endless stretches of quiet as a source of tension. Here, it's meditative. Something about this place feels almost nostalgic. This sandy backdrop ends up being a tool for that introspection, like Abzu's water. Less a substance and more a Zen garden than an actual desert. A meditation masked as an open world video game. It's kind of brilliant. It was just me, Simoon, the sand, and my thoughts. What path would I end up choosing for Sable? Machinist? Climber? Angler? Sandworm? And for that matter, what path would I choose for myself? The clean and airy atmosphere gave me space to ponder and to really consider these choices. No grains of sand lodge themselves between your toes. It's not coarse or rough, and it doesn't get everywhere. And there's no need to worry about a sunburn. This desert is beautifully distilled, a metaphor of sand, in favor of the real thing.
The symbolism of sand as a foundation for our world continues in our collective subconscious, and the story of sand is indeed never-ending.
That's the voice of my friend Kiki from the YouTube channel Transparency, by the way. They introduced me to this book about the science of sand called, well, sand. And now I'm making it your problem. Let's talk about sand. After all, it's the namesake of this game. In French, but you know.
Sable.
Technically, this game could have taken place anywhere, but setting Sable's passage into adulthood against a sea of silica feels somehow inevitable. Sand is actually really weird. It's all around us, but the more you think about it, the less sense it makes. Like when you think about how sand castles stay up, or the way sand turns into liquid when you pour it out of your hand, there's endless infinitesimal space between each grain of sand. Of the 36 biologically recognized phyla on our planet, our rainforests, bastion of biodiversity, contain a whopping 16. The spaces between sand grains, home to 22. Physicists are still trying to explain the phenomena of sand to this day. It's at once a mystery and unsettlingly familiar, a tool for us to describe the microscopic and the unthinkable gigantic. But the one thing we do know about sand is its propensity for change. It doesn't have a final state.
The birth of a sand grain signifies the death of a mountain. The rocky outcrop from which it fell is now infinitesimally smaller.
Sand didn't just start life as sand. Follow just one grain for long enough, and you'll see crumbling mountains, undulating deserts, and restless sediment in a riverbed. But even then, sand isn't an end product. It can find ways to harden into sandstone, starting that cycle all over again. Sand reminds us that the world is in a never-ending cycle of metamorphosis. It's post-rock, pre-glass, the result of rotting, corroding, and comminuting stones, or molten rock launched out of the mouth of a volcano, frozen in air and shattered. Sand isn't just one thing or a singular element, it's a step in a greater process of change. And that's the thing about sand as a substance. It may be solid, but flows like liquid, swaying, shifting, nomadic in nature.
When sand moves under a gathering desert wind, it seems to take on a life of its own.
While Sable is tasked with decision, The wilds around her show us the beauty of indecision, constant change. Sand as a substance is a pretty evocative metaphor too, factoring into regional folklore as a starting point of creation myths. It's everywhere, ubiquitous, and equally confounding, almost mythical. The brevity of footprints on a beach, ever-changing dunes pushed around by gusts of wind, sand in an hourglass. It all comes back to that theme of transition, mystery, and inevitable change, and works perfectly as the backdrop for embracing that change while setting off into the mysteries of the unknown, sand beckoning. I've never really been one for coming-of-age media. Movies and books, even the great ones, that detail the period of transition that is adolescence, seemingly always fall into the trap of repeating story beats and genre tropes. And as someone who went to film school to study these exact patterns in media, I have a hard time not picking those things out when I watch a movie. It becomes a predictable checklist rather than an experience to sink into. Coming-of-age stories may have moments of authenticity, but almost always end with a big moment, a choice or confrontation to put a neat bow on the whole thing, a dramatized decision. But that's the thing about life. Our lives change gradually, not during a scripted climax. I think that's why I found a video game about that same transitional period in life so engaging. Because it's not trying to fit the larger amorphous reality of that point in someone's life into a classic narrative structure. Instead, Shedworks presents the player with delightfully disparate but thematically linked character interactions to be discovered at their own speed. It can be just as overwhelming and beautiful and disorienting and contemplative as the moments of self-discovery in our adolescence, without squeezing that experience into the confines of narrative story structures, and can therefore present us with much more intriguing questions too. But more importantly, because this is a video game, by nature, our experience of the story will be our own. You are the author of Sable's story here, meaning our journey with Sable is unique to us. And that makes the revelations and choices a lot more personal too. Not to say there aren't some classic coming-of-age tropes woven in from time to time. We learn firsthand how unfair the world can be in Midden's metropolis of Ecria. As we enter the walled city, we're instantly greeted by a dilemma. The power's been cut, and a city guard needs us to help catch the culprit. And like any classic coming-of-age story, we're presented with a tough choice. A moment that will shape Sable's understanding of the world. Was it the corrupt traitor Iria who stands to profit from the outage? The shifty machinist Hamza? Or a climber named Garay? Turns out, no matter what you choose, the outcome is mostly the same. And the truth is never fully brought to light, a glimpse for Sable at how you can't always defeat the big bad in real life, tempering her childlike notion that the good guys always win in the adult world. Set pieces like this Heartbreak in the City quest reinforce the idea that sometimes there is no correct decision, and as adults, we just have to learn to live with that sometimes. But nevertheless, Sable is about making those choices anyway. The nature of those choices, and how our choices make us who we are, under our masks. And sure, most modern video games that boast an open world let you go anywhere and let you play the way you want. You could say they're all about choice too. Marketing the game is now more than ever about selling a sandbox rather than a story or gameplay feature. The choices you make in most games don't end up amounting to much when it comes to the narrative though. But Sable, the narrative here, its themes, and pretty much every character you run into reinforces the idea that our freedom to choose is what makes us, us. Metamorphosis. even down to the names of the side quest. A pretty basic fetch quest from this innkeeper to collect beetle husks is titled Remnants of Change, and not to mention the fact that we can tackle these quests in any order, at any speed, with no level gates or prerequisites to halt us in our progression. We're relentlessly given choices to change Sable's path at every turn. Even when the tribe's leader tells us it's time to wrap up our gliding, her tone seems hesitant, as if she doesn't want to interrupt your adventure, because she too understands this power of freedom that you'll never again have, as if she knows that making this choice would stifle Sable's youthful exuberance. Of course, mechanically, this is just the game saying, hey, you can wrap up your adventure now if you want to. After you've collected 3 masks, you can roll credits and move on to the next game in your Steam backlog. But at this point, it's likely you'll have bumped into enough interesting characters that you'll have a few loose threads to take care of. Some more side quests like collecting lightning gems or finding out what's up with this ancient sundial. The world's design and narrative of Sable's coming of age clash in this really interesting way. The people that populate this desert landscape are geographical outcasts, nomadic clans, and yet they've all settled into their traditionally chosen professions over time, often presented as content rather than happy. But the sandy backdrop is daring you to keep exploring, to keep carving your own path through it, and the most memorable characters you meet along the way are doing the same. When you're first set loose onto the world with Simoon gently whirring and whining through the buttery sand, there's only one real destination, Burnt Oak Station. A pretty minimal location that plays host to a few cookie-cutter NPCs, a merchant, an innkeeper, a farmer, but then there's Elisabeth, an Ecrian guard transitioning into old age after dutifully walking her chosen path for decades. But now's her chance to see the world again, her second gliding as she refers to it.
Always nice to meet a fellow adventurer. I'm about to join you in that blissful freedom. You see, I'm getting ready to leave on my second gliding.
She finally gets to see the world on her own terms again. While having been content in her duties, she clearly regrets not exploring more of the world during her first gliding.
I was in such a hurry to get to Ecria and become a guard that my gliding was more of a piercing, a straight shot to the big city.
So set in her goals that she didn't take full advantage of that youthful freedom.
Tomorrow marks the first time in decades that I'll wake up and have absolutely no idea what lies ahead. And I've never been more excited. A chance to see the world again and how it's changed. I know it feels like whatever you choose is yours forever, but it's one of many choices you're going to make. Not even the biggest one.
And the more and more you run into Elisabeth throughout her second gliding, you realize just how restrictive these paths can be over the course of one's life. And how freeing it must be to finally release yourself of those bonds, even if you wore them with initial pride.
There's plenty more life to live.
It's why characters like Lore the Fabulist run to the furthest reaches of the Sodic Waste to escape their responsibilities. Her path led her to pen poems and religious propaganda for the Atomic Priesthood. They provide a life of comfort and luxury in exchange for her word weaving. And yet, she ran, for this path is no longer her own.
The priests give me a good life. I spread their word and they treat me like a queen. But there's still something wrong. I'm at an impasse, for what I desire is to choose a path, and you are very much on the same journey.
A charmed life, but with no freedom or agency.
Makes me wonder what else I could do. Could I be more peculiar? Or more fun? Funny, even?
Lore's dilemma showcases that it's okay and even healthy to question our place in the world, even if our profession affords us great privilege and comfort. it doesn't always mean we'll be fulfilled, itching for a change.
Why do we explore? What drives us? Are we seeking out purpose, or are we indulging in our freedom?
And look at Cassie, too, the curator of the vivarium. Based on her mask, we can see she chose the path of the anglers, but ended up following her own passions instead, choosing happiness over societal expectations and creating this vivarium tucked away in the rolling hills of the Wash. If we come across the moving angler hut to the north, we can ask Yoshi about his former protege, and he lights up.
You know Cassie? How is she?
Fishing wasn't her calling in the end. And yet, Yoshi is nevertheless a proud mentor.
Always worried she thought she failed me or something, because she wasn't much for fishing. Who cares, I say? I just wanted her to do what she loved. And it sounds like she is.
Expressing a reverence for Cassie's willingness to chase her dreams, no matter what mask she may wear. Sable doesn't need to pigeonhole herself into picking just one life path like the guidelines of the gliding ritual seem to dictate either. Like most of us, she's a multifaceted individual with wide-ranging interests. Change is a process of choices. Our lives don't transform overnight, and that's what Sable presents so masterfully. The gradual nature of choice itself, and the ability for us to change, regardless of those choices. But by the medium's nature, Sable needs a conclusion, and our gliding does have to come to an end if we want to see those credits. So while the game does have one final choice for Sable to make, it's not really presented as the end of her story. In the end, I did take the job, cut back on the time I take to create videos and stream on Twitch. I'm learning to value quality over quantity now, and it's not as scary as I thought it would be. Not trying to rush these video essays each and every month. I'm honestly a lot less stressed now. Most of the time. Growing up, there's endless moments like that where a leap of faith is a lot more frightening in the moment. But looking back, we might think, what were we really afraid of? I changed majors and switched universities before finding the right one. Changed life paths countless times already. And like any grain of sand, those experiences are imprinted on me, making up who I am now. I gain something new to bring with me every time. Changing, never stationary, and better for it. Our world doesn't always reward patience, or exploring all the potential paths stretching out before us. We're asked very abruptly at a certain age to make a decision, and we're incentivized to stick with it. Promotions, raises, incentives to stay the same, like we're some monolith of singular purpose. If we stray or take a minute to weigh our options, we're labeled slacker, indecisive. But I think something that not enough coming-of-age stories tell us is that it's never too late to change your mind. Go on that second gliding. Question your purpose. Or make a path all your own. Who knows where we'll be in 5 years? Accepting that bit of unknown is kind of liberating.
The intrinsic character, value, and spiritual appeal of sand as a medium is its fragility, its impermanence.
Sable seems to be looking squarely at the player and asking, should these life-changing decisions be set in stone? And can they be? When stone inevitably crumbles into sand, ever shifting? Oh, and if you're curious, I chose the sandworm mask for extra squelches. Hey there, I hope you enjoyed the video essay. If you did, make sure to click the like button down below and subscribe to the channel for more video essays like this one. Also, make sure to check out all my friends who collaborated on this video with me. Without them, this video would not have been possible. The quotes from Sand by Michael Welland were read by Kiki from Transparency. Elisabeth the Acrian Guard was played by Jinsey/Properbird. Lore the Fabulist was brought to life by Aronach. And Hot Cider portrayed Yoshi the Angler. Again, thank you to all of these lovely people for saying yes to being in the video. All of their links are going to be in the description. Go check them out. They make amazing video game analysis content. And if you'd like to financially support these videos going forward, I do have a Ko-fi page linked down below in the pinned comment. It's kind of like Patreon, but a lot cooler. Over there, you can become a monthly supporter for as little as $4 a month, and you'll get behind the scenes content, sneak peeks at future videos, and shout outs at the end here. Which reminds me, thank you so much to these lovely monthly supporters. Nightmare God, One's the Loneliest, John Lax, Bean Fiello, Sarah, Cap Danvers, Vox Amandius, Puzzled Monkey Tree, Mumpow, Oyster Milk, Dear Papaya, Comrade Quest, Robertson, Max Wattage, Lion Bite, and Veltwalker. Without them, these videos would not get made. They are not cheap to produce, and I put tens of hours into these videos. This one took me like 100 hours with all the filming of everything, so thank you. And you can also check the description for links to any of the games that I mentioned in any of my video essays. They'll take you to Humble Bundle, and if you purchase anything, I get a cut of the commission at no extra cost to you, and some of that also goes to trans charities, which I think is pretty cool. Anyway, I will see you in the next video essay, and until then, share the video.